Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to speak to you about the Eurostar. The Eurostar is actually my favourite train of all trains. I find it, firstly, a very impressive project in terms of infrastructure. I find it fascinating how you can just jump on a train and in 2 hours I can be back home in London, despite the fact that I am living on the other side of the channel. And I also I very much like it because of the memories I have of when I used to travel across to France when I was young, when I was a teenager, and this was when the Eurostar had first opened. So it's a bit of nostalgia that makes it a favourable train for me, but it's also to do with the practicality of it in my current lifestyle. I like to return to London regularly to see family and friends, and it's incredibly easy with the Eurostar. So just today I was looking through the news this morning on my mobile, and I came across a news story on the Eurostar, and so I thought that this could serve as a bit of inspiration for my speech, and so I then carried out a bit of research to look at more broad topics concerning the Eurostar. So the news story, well, what does it say exactly? Well, it's just a report of the financial situation of the Eurostar business, since Eurostar is a company itself. And what this story tells us is that for the first time, the number of passengers taking the Eurostar has gone above 10 million per year. Then there's also other good news for shareholders in Eurostar, because we are told that revenues from ticket sales rose 7%. This means that now this revenue stands at £857 million for the year 2013. This is the equivalent of 1.4 billion euros. The operating profit of the company also rose, and it went up from 4%. It went up by 4% to a total of £54 million. So the managers of Eurostar were quizzed as to why they think that they are seeing this success in the trains that they operate. And they said that after a period of economic uncertainty, they are now seeing that the fruits of the economic recovery. They're seeing more business travel in particular, more people wanting to cross the channel for a meeting, maybe people who need to who have operations that they carry out both in Paris and in London, or maybe in Brussels. And so this is really the main reason behind this growth in ticket sales and in profit. And as a matter of fact, if we look at the revenue increase for business trips, then we can see that they are up 6.2% in if we compare 2013 to 2012. So I myself have contributed to these figures because last year I was working, up until December, I was working at the University of Westminster, and I was travelling on the Eurostar each time I had to go and teach there. And when I would buy my tickets, there's a number of options that you are invited to choose, or you're invited to choose one of a number of options of whether you're traveling for leisure, to see friends and family, or for business. And so seeing as I was going there to teach for a professional activity, I would click the box business. So I've contributed in my small way to this 6.2% rise. So what about the Eurostar in general? What could we say if we look back at the many years that this great project has seen in its history? Well, Of course, when we talk about, well, we shouldn't really just talk about the Eurostar. We should talk in a more general sense of the Eurotunnel. Eurostar is the company that operates the train service which connects Brussels to London and Paris to London. But but the tunnel itself is operated by a company called Eurotunnel. So in addition to crossing the channel on what is a TGV train, a high-speed train, you can also cross it on a freight train, for example, if you have to transport goods between England and France, or you can use a similar train to take your car across the channel. So I'll tell you more about the car crossing the channel in a few minutes. But let's have a look at a few of the let's have a look at the background of the idea of digging a tunnel under the channel. Well, the tunnel itself was inaugurated in 1994, and it shortened the time that one needed to cross the channel considerably. Nowadays it takes about 25 to 30 minutes to go from this is from when you descend into the tunnel to when you come out the other end. If you take the fastest ferries possible, on the other hand, if you were to cross from the French coast to the English coast, then the fastest you can do this in is an hour and a half. So you can see there's a considerable difference there. So the engineers, when they decided to build this tunnel, they chose to connect Calais with well, more specifically we should say Sangatte. This is the point of the French coast which is closest to the UK, and so the tunnel now connects Sangatte with Shakespeare Cliff in England, and this is the length between the two, the distance between the two is just 33 kilometers, so they are actually quite close. It is indeed not the first time that somebody had envisaged the idea of digging a tunnel to connect France and England. If we look back even to Napoleon's time, we can see that there were French engineers who were dreaming about projects of digging a tunnel to link these two land masses. But as we all know, Napoleon, we're all glad to know that Napoleon failed in his attempt to invade the British Isles. It would have been a true tragedy if nowadays we had been forced, if we were now forced to speak French and to follow French ways. So it's good that Napoleon never got the chance to build this tunnel, I have to say. And then later on, a few decades after Napoleon's time, there was another attempt to build a tunnel between the two, to link the British Isles to the rest of Europe, and indeed engineers did begin digging a tunnel of this type in the year 1880, so almost 150 years ago. But the project was put to an end because the Brits were scared of being invaded by the French. Now, of course, let me just update you on your history. The French have never invaded the UK. Nowadays, some French people may claim that they have done, but they might be referring back to William the Conqueror, who was actually not French at all. He was a Norman. So, just to update you on history there. Anyway, so the work was halted during this attempt to connect the UK with France, and this was after the engineers and the workers had already dug 2 kilometers under the ground on each side of the channel. So then we had to wait another 100 years before another project was put together to dig a tunnel of this type. The agreement was signed between Margaret Thatcher and François Mitterrand in the year 1990. And this meant that finally the British Isles are actually no longer a set of, well, England is no longer on an island, we could say, because it's connected to a larger landmass, the European continent. So so if we are to look at the actual makeup of the tunnel itself and how it was dug, then we can see that across most of the sea crossing between France and the UK, the sea is roughly 40 meters deep. So the tunnel is more than 40 meters below the surface of the water. Now, of course, the tunnel wasn't dug through sand. That would simply be absurd, and it would have meant that the tunnel would have collapsed quite quickly. If you look at a geological diagram of the area, then you can see that the seabed is made up of sand, first of all. Underneath that there is a layer of white chalk, but this is not suitable for a tunnel to be dug through because it is permeable rock, so water can seep through very easily. But then just below this layer of white chalk you have a layer of blue chalk, and this is much more solid and it is much more viable for drilling through. So I don't know if you've seen pictures of the drill that was actually used itself. I remember once driving past it, and I think it's somewhere off the coast, somewhere near the coast of England, and they still have this huge drill which is just sitting there, and it's an immense object. The shape of the tunnel itself, a big circular object. It weighs 1,200 tons, so incredibly heavy, and as it was digging it moved quite slowly through the rock, and of course it would be very difficult to push an object of this size through the rock. It moved at a speed of just 5 meters every hour. As the drill moved through the chalk, as soon as it passed through, concrete plaques were immediately fastened to the inner sides of the tunnel, and this provided support and it strengthened the tunnel, preventing it from collapsing immediately after having been dug. These concrete plaques were fit very tightly together, and this means that immediately, as soon as the tunnel was dug, water would not be able to seep through any cracks at all. 10,000 workers were those that needed to work night and day on this project. It was completed on the 6th of May 1994, and the very first customers were, of course, the Queen of England, Elizabeth II, and the President of France, François Mitterrand. The Eurotunnel, actually, now that I look at my figures, I realise that maybe it wasn't that Mitterrand was, I think, not the President of France at that time. I think it was Jacques Chirac. So I guess Mitterrand was one of the first passengers because he was the president who signed the agreement with Margaret Thatcher at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. So later, maybe the interpreters can correct me on that if necessary. So the Eurotunnel service, as I said, is one which provides a service both for freight, for goods, and for passengers. I remember when I was a kid going with my parents and my brothers and sisters in our car. We had quite a large car because we're quite a large family, and we drove the car onto the train itself and sat there on the car for half an hour or so as we waited to arrive in France on the other side. This was very exciting at the time. The trains actually have 2 decks for the cars, so your car will be directed either to the lower deck or the upper deck, and each train can take 120 cars in total. Of course, when you drive into the train itself, this means that the train fills with exhaust fumes, because the cars have to drive right to the end until they find their spot. So there is a ventilation system which removes the exhaust fumes, and as soon as you arrive in your spot, you have to turn off your engine. Then during the journey, you sit in your car and you simply wait to arrive. So if your car is comfortable, then you can be assured of a comfortable journey. But you can also walk around the train itself, and I remember when I was a teenager, I would run up and down the train and I would go through the fireproof doors. You can go up to the door, press it, and an automatic door opens, allowing you to pass into the next carriage, and in this way you can go all the way down the train, which is very exciting when you're 15. So other things that I remember from these trips were the long waits that we had at the border. Of course, this is that when you cross when you take the Eurotunnel, you're actually crossing from the UK to the rest of Europe, or vice versa. And so all cars that pass through have to be checked for smuggled goods and for illegal immigrants. This is done often thanks to a sensor which can actually check the heat that is being emitted from each vehicle. And it means that if an illegal immigrant is stowed away somewhere in the vehicle, their body heat will be detected. There are also checks that are carried out for the CO2 levels within the lorries. So this allows the border guards to see whether there is somebody inside the lorry breathing. And of course, every now and then immigrants are found in lorries or in all the many vehicles that pass through the Eurotunnel. They are, for the most part, taken to a detention centre. Over the years since the creation of the Eurotunnel, there have been many human tragedies that have occurred regarding the immigrants that have been found. There have been many deaths that have been caused from immigrants being stowed away in very inhumane conditions. And I've seen more than one story appearing in the news on this. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've still got a number of other things to say about the Eurotunnel, but I think we will give our interpreters a break here. Thank you.